Hello, welcome to Inside the Tape with Greg Cosell. It's an Inside the Birds presentation. I'm Geoff Mosher alongside Adam Caplan, and joining us every week to break down the tape of the Eagles game is Greg Cosell. And Greg and Adam, the Eagles are now 8-2 on top of the NFC East thanks to their 28-16 win over the Commanders last Thursday night. Greg, kind of a strange game because as the Eagles offense seems stuck in the first half and then bam, in the fourth quarter, they explode for 20 points. And then meanwhile, the defense on the other side, though, held a very good Commanders offense to just one touchdown outside of the fourth quarter. You could call it garbage time. So when you watch the tape, Greg, from big picture standpoints, both offensive and defensively, what jumped out to you?
I mean, to me, at this point, the defense is really jumping out. I mean, we can debate forever the quality of the opponent. So it's the NFL. That's the way it works. Their defense has been playing at a really high level. And, this summer, I spent a good amount of time talking to people about some of the nuances of the Vic Fangio defense so I could learn more. And I'm really seeing it on tape. I'm seeing the little details that just really that's what makes defense. I mean, obviously, great players, help. When Jalen Carter has dominant snaps, that goes beyond the little nuances of how you play the defense. Well, but it's just coaches don't think like that. Coaches, the good coaches that I've been around, and I've been around a lot, and I know you guys have talked to them as well. They might tell the media, oh, great players, blah, 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 but that's not the way they coach it. They coach all the details. And when I really learned a lot more this summer and I see the details on film with their defense, that really stood out to me. It's been standing out.
Yeah, I think that's a great sign year one where the real Fangio is here with the Eagles, and he's got to learn a lot of new players. They have, by the way, a brand new defensive staff, save Jeremiah Washburn. And Greg, the thing, and I remember we pointed this out in the Cincinnati tape that you broke down for us, the communication is the thing that blows me away. When you have two rookies who are playing major roles, Zach Bond's never played linebacker in his life inside, and you're having one of the best defensive football. In fact, they're number one ranked defense by numbers. It's hard to believe.
Well, they since in their 6-game winning streak, if I did the math and checked things correctly, their 22 sacks are second in the NFL behind the Chargers in those 6 games.
Wow.
They've only allowed 2 passing touchdowns. And I think they've only allowed 130 or so passing yards per game in that 6-game stretch. So their defensive numbers are off the charts. And some coaches look at numbers, some coaches don't care about numbers. But the bottom line is that the production is there and it shows up on tape.
Yeah, absolutely. So why don't we start off with the defense then? We'll get into the defense first and then the offense. Greg, not surprisingly, the Eagles were a heavy nickel team again, like we've been talking about week after week. And this was interesting because Washington did put some 21 personnel on the field. They did play some 12, but the Eagles are going to respond in nickel. What did you notice about Vic Fangio's preference of two high versus one high safeties and what he was doing on the back end in this game?
This was a game where I thought you saw sort of the Fangio scheme the way, it's been talked about for years, where almost every snap, not every, but almost every snap, they started in a quarter structure. And that's always been sort of the foundation of the Fangio defense, because when you start in a quarter structure, you can go to anything. And now they stayed a lot in the game in a quarter structure, but when you start there, you can go to single high, you can go to cover 2, you can do anything you want from a quarter structure. So, and normally, just so people understand what that means, normally it means that your safeties are anywhere from 10 to 12 yards off the ball, and your corners are 7 to 8 yards off the ball. That's a quarter structure.
And what about Jaden Daniels? I meant to ask you this. Adam and I thought that, and you watched him on tape a lot more than we did, that, we know he's got the rib injury. They're saying he's healthy. It looked like he lacked some torque on some throws, but I can't tell if that's injury related or if the Eagles just put pressure on him. But could you tell from other games you've watched to this game that his throws didn't have the same kind of juice to them?
I don't know if it's injury based, but the last 2 weeks against the Steelers and the Eagles, I don't think he's looked very good. He's looked uncomfortable to me. That could be a function of injury, Jeff. Only he can tell you that. And
Mhm.
obviously, he's not going to sit out if he can play. But I mean, I thought, one of the really bad misses he's had all season was that intermediate crosser to Brown on 2nd and 9 in the second quarter. I'm sure you remember that. He threw it right at his feet.
Yep.
Um,
Yes.
it was the
Yes.
post-cross
Oh yeah.
combination versus cover three, which is exactly when you want to run post-cross. Brown was wide open, and if he hit him in stride, I'm not saying it would have been a touchdown, but he had room to turn up the field. That would
Mhm.
have been a big gain. And that's a throw you just have to make. I mean, injured or not injured, if you're on the field playing, and this is what I learned, Adam can vouch for this with Ron Jaworski. If you're playing, that none of that stuff matters. You got to make the throws, and he's got to make that throw.
Good stuff.
Absolutely. Well, so let's start when we talk about the Eagles defense. You mentioned that they are leading or tied with the Chargers, you said, for sacks since
Second, Chargers have 23 in the last 6 weeks,
mhm.
6 games, and the Eagles have 22.
Right. The Eagles had 3 sacks against the Commanders. It didn't look like like an amazing like pass rush game, but there were some individual moments there. And oddly enough, the guy who didn't get a sack was Jalen Carter, who just seemingly
But he
survived
was
pressure all night
responsible for
long.
sweat sack.
Right. Exactly. So, what did you see up front?
I thought it was solid. I thought early in the game they had to settle in a little. That drive where the Commander scored a touchdown, they ran the ball a little bit. I thought, you know, I got to tell you, every week, and I know I say this every week, and I think Blankenship is a trendsetter on this defense. He's a tempo setter. I mean, there was a play where he made a really big hit on Robinson after Robinson gained 6 or 7 yards, and he just comes down from his quarter structure from the back end, and he makes plays in the run game and he hits people. And I think he helps be a tempo setter for this defense. I really do.
Nice. All right. Well, that's always a good development there. What about from the mid interior linebacker play? What did you notice about Bond and Dean?
Um, Yeah, this was a game where I thought that the Commanders had a couple of concepts where they attacked Bond and Dean and had some success. Like there was a 20-yard reception to Eckler on their first third quarter possession, which was a really well-designed concept off a zone read look. There was an outside zone fake. It was in pony. Eckler crossed the formation behind the line of scrimmage into the flat. The play concept put Bond in conflict with his run responsibility and his pass coverage responsibility. They did a good job a couple of times with that. You'll probably see more teams try to do those kinds of things. Every team tries those things. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. But they had a couple of individual plays that were successful. But after the first couple of series, I thought the Eagles' run defense really tightened up. It was good. Carter, as we talked about with the Patreon group, Carter played at a really high level as an individual. Um, Jordan Davis has a couple of splash plays every game in the run game. Um, so yeah, I mean, another solid performance.
Greg, just staying on the secondary, you mentioned
Yeah,
Blankenship, and that's good to know. But everybody keeps asking us about Quinyon Mitchell. Is he the next Bobby Taylor? And that's another conversation. Let's ease up a little bit. But
Oh, it's
guys,
not Darrell Revis. It's
yeah,
not
exactly
I
right.
thought he was Deion Sanders, Adam.
that's right. It was
Really?
Deion Sanders.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hopefully we'll see if
yeah,
Quinyon coaches when he's done playing. But
yeah, yeah.
so they played 10 games, right? And
Yeah.
and I remember your scouting report, you liked the player coming out of Toledo.
Well, I
You
loved
talked.
him other than the one thing, he never played
Yes.
press.
Right. Never played press coverage. Now we've got 10 games in now in the bank. What are your thoughts on him so far?
I think he's been very, very good for a rookie. And um And I think that from everything I've heard from conversations is he is a true professional for a young kid. And that's been a major factor in his coachability, in his understanding, in how he approaches his job. But on tape, because I'm not there for the other part, but I just, I hear that from other people.
Yeah.
But just watching him on tape, I think he's playing really, really well. He doesn't really get fooled or burned. I mean, our guy's going to catch balls. Yeah, what was that game? Was it the Atlanta game early in the season where they attacked him on the
I
final
think it was
drive?
the Atlanta game, yes, and then the Buccaneers game. They got
Yeah, I
him
mean,
too.
are they going to? Hey, you're a corner in the NFL. You know
Right.
what? You're going to get beat.
Right.
But I think overall, he's played at a really high level. Um, I think that the athleticism and the combination of size, athleticism, loose hips is really at a pretty high level. I mean, I think he has a chance to be a really good corner. You know, I'm not one because I've done this for so many years. I'm not one to sit here and say, man, he reminds me of Darrell Revis. He reminds me
Right.
of you know, but I just think he's played really, really well. And you know, I think and DeJean has played really, really well. So
Hmm.
they've got a right corner and a slot corner. And DeJean's the reason they play 87, 88% nickel. That he's the reason.
Right. Greg, we love to be educational on this show, so I want to sort of take that secondary conversation into specifically against Washington and
Okay.
how they defended. And I say like we like to be educational, and I like to say sometimes people should just stay off social media after a big win
Oh
because
yeah, yeah.
narratives get a little crazy because you would almost think that Quinyon Mitchell matched up against Terry McLaurin 30 times and locked him down 30
Yeah.
times in man
And
press
there were
coverage.
probably 4 or 5 snaps that happened, and he did a good
Right.
job. I'm not going to
Yep.
sit here and say he didn't do a good job, but it wasn't a matchup all game. I
Right.
saw the same stuff on social media where it's like, oh, he just shut down Terry McLaurin. Well, you know, he did when he covered him, he did well, but it
Yes.
was, I don't know, 5 or 6 snaps.
Right. They've mostly played zone, if I'm not
Well,
mistaken, on the back
yeah,
end.
and he plays on the right. You know, I mean, he doesn't travel with anybody.
All
Correct.
right. I have the numbers from Next Gen Stats. Mitchell aligned across from McLaurin 20 out of 25 routes, including 19 of 20 aligned wide. Mitchell was not targeted on any of those coverage snaps against McLaurin and was targeted just once all night, and he had no receptions. There you go.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
lining up is not the same because you'd have to know what routes McLaurin ran.
Okay.
Right.
You know,
Gotcha.
Right.
because he's playing zone. He's not following him.
Right. He's not shadowing. Right.
Sure.
Correct.
Right.
Hey,
Correct.
look, I think
So,
we can all agree,
so
though.
that's a stat that, you know, it you know how I feel about these kinds of stats. It's like with pressure on a quarterback because they do
Mhm.
it by how close a guy is to a
Right.
quarterback. You know,
Right.
Right.
so yeah, I mean, McLaurin's going to line up either on the left or the right. Okay. So when he lines up on the left, there's Mitchell. But that
Right.
doesn't mean that he's, yeah.
I think
So
the important thing is we can all agree, because we've all watched the Eagles for over 2 decades here, is that it's been a long time since we could say that they had two young, promising corners of Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean's ability,
correct.
and it's a really good thing for the Eagles to have.
Yep.
Let's talk real quickly about Nolan Smith, Greg, because he's bound to play a little bit more going forward.
Because Huff is going to be
Now,
out, right?
yeah, with
Yep.
Bryce Huff
Yep.
sidelined, we'll say indefinitely with a wrist injury. I don't want just the Washington game now. We've got a bigger sample here. You know, we're in week 12. What have you come to any long term, or at least do you feel confident in knowing what Nolan Smith is right now?
Not yet. I mean, I think that it seems like once a game, and it happened on this in this game as well. There was a 3rd and 5 in the third quarter where he showed a really good pass rush against the rookie left tackle Coleman. He had a swipe rip move, and then he did bend to flatten his path to the quarterback. It seems like once a game he shows a pass rush, and you go, "Oh, if I could see more of that, man, maybe this guy can rush the quarterback." But it's not at this point in time, it's not happening often enough. So I don't want to sit here because I've been doing this for a lot of years and say that a kid in his second season who wasn't really a good pass rusher coming into the league can't rush the quarterback for his whole career. I don't want to say that. So
Hmm.
therefore, I feel like it's an unfinished product. You know, you see flashes and you like I said, I think to myself, okay, can you do that more often? But until he does it more often, he's not really a quality pass rusher.
Is he winning with just speed at this point?
He's starting Adam to use his hands a little more, and that's
Okay.
why I don't want to say I'm optimistic. All of a sudden, he's going to become, Robert Mathis, because I just thought of someone who's about the same
Oh,
size, you know.
wow.
But the fact that he's starting to understand how to use his hands because he's not going to win just by running through guys. I mean, he just is not going to be a pure speed to power guy.
Hmm.
So he has to learn how to play off contact with hand usage, all those moves that we talk about, rib moves, club moves, there's a half dozen of them.
Yeah.
And that's where he has to keep learning. So could it happen? Sure. I don't know. It could.
Right. So Adam, was it? I don't even remember anymore if it was we do so many recordings now a week. I can't remember
Yeah.
when or where I say things, but I was talking with Adam Gregg and I said for the first time I get a stronger impression about what you said about Nolan Smith coming out of college, that with his speed, with his athleticism, his
Yeah.
ability to chase down plays as a defensive end or an edge player side to side, that if the Eagles couldn't bring Zach Bond back because he got so pricey and he's a
Right.
linebacker, that maybe they would start that transition next year and maybe they can actually get another time. Again, you have to have the instincts that Zach Bond has shown, and that could be rare, but at least the speed, the athleticism, I could see it.
Yeah, I mean, he makes plays with pursuit, speed, and range. That's where you see him make his plays for the most part. I mean, he's a great athlete. He's long. He can run. He covers ground. That's a major learning curve. Like they'd have to make that decision right after the season and start that with the first day of whether you call it OTAs or minicamp. I don't know which one is which.
Yeah.
But that's when the decision would have to be made.
All right. You mentioned a couple of plays on defense we're going to take a look at. First down for Washington. And Greg, you see the running backs there, how they're aligned?
Yeah, this was actually a different one, but I know this one. This one, I
Okay.
think Bond just got stuck. He just didn't recognize it.
Well, what I thought was interesting and I wanted you to diagnose was how the running backs here were aligned, one
Yeah,
behind the other
yeah.
in with the quarterback in kind of a pistol here, because I believe that when you're trying to key and diagnose and I believe in man coverage, you got to figure out as a running back which guy you're going to take, right?
This being a Thursday night game, I thought Kirk Herbstreit did a great job explaining this. It's
Hmm.
just Bond got stuck. I mean,
Right.
this wasn't one of those, this wasn't one where they tried to put him in conflict. This was one where he just got stuck
Did he
because
get
he's
stuck because at
responsible.
this point, when there's a motion, Eckler looks like maybe Dean would be on him and then he would be on Robinson?
And I guarantee that, if we were talking to Bond, he'd say this is right now before the play starts,
Hmm.
he's thinking is that Robinson, the other back?
Yes.
Yes.
Right now, here's what he's thinking. It's man coverage. So he
Right.
knows that DeJean has the slot and he knows
Hmm.
that Mitchell has the outside receiver. So
Right.
now he has the back because the back's number 3 and the back's
Right.
to his side. So if
Right.
the back were to release to that side, he's got the back. Okay. So
Hmm.
now, because Eckler goes in motion, Eckler replaces Robinson as the back that Bond has, and
Right.
Bond just got stuck. You can
Yep.
see his eyes are still inside. He did not make the transition recognition that now Eckler is mine.
See, now you mentioned the word conflict on a different play, and I almost thought that this was sort of a
I mean,
form
it
of
is a
conflict.
conflict in a strict sense
Yeah.
because yes,
And it was a really well designed play because
yeah.
all it took was just that little
Because you can
bit.
see that his eyes were in the backfield. He never made the recognition of Eckler.
Right. And then here's the play. And then, what he's been good at has been cleaning up tackles, but obviously because he was a little bit behind,
Yeah.
tried to arm tackle here, and it just
So he just got
did
stuck
not
here.
go.
He just,
Yeah.
he didn't. The change in the backfield from who became number 3, who was
Hmm.
his man, um, just it caused a problem for him.
Yeah. And you can see from this angle, I mean, they're really just one behind the other.
That's
And
great.
Right,
then the reverse motion and then back put him in that kind of, uh-oh, what do I do
right.
here? Yeah. Good. It was a good play. I
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
Here's a play I want to show that I think demonstrates a good move by the linebackers and just overall defense. What I think his Bond is on the line, but because he drops out, you could see Daniels looking at McLaurin here, but he takes that away. So then he has to go to the
Right.
right
So
side.
here's a perfect example, by the way, that if Bond doesn't drop out, he was going to hit McLaurin on the slant, and
Right,
he's wide open.
right.
So, I mean, that's why you got to be careful about all these things that. But
Hmm.
anyway, so yeah, so Bond drops out and he can't throw it.
Right. So Bond at the top of the screen drops out, takes the
So
slant
now
away.
he's got to go. So where he looks now is inside because you don't go from all the way one side to the other side. So
Right.
he's now looking inside and it looks muddy. So
Yeah.
yeah, it
That's
looks
Noah
muddy.
Brown,
He's
who's
going to look
obviously
there
got
and then
two
he's going
guys.
to look to the snag route right next to Dean, but that's done too. So
Hmm.
at that point he starts to move because he's in the end zone and he feels like I can't stand there. So
Right.
because this is zone coverage.
Yep.
So
Yep.
this is just played really, really well.
Yeah, I just wanted to use this as an example of how they bottled up McLaurin and forced Daniels to go in a different direction with
Yeah,
the ball. And this is good team defense.
It's
yeah,
a
I mean,
great
I don't
drop
know
by
if Bourne.
Vaughn.
Look again. you never know how coaches see, specific play calls by the opposition in given situations. We
Hmm.
don't know if they anticipated that McLaurin would be, they throw a slant or a glance to McLaurin as the
Hmm.
boundary X, which he was here, and that's why he dropped ball now. We don't know the answer to that, but
Right.
that's what ended up happening.
Yep. Yep. And obviously, when you put ball on the line of scrimmage like that as a fifth, you make the quarterback at least think in his head, all right, I might have that chance to
Right.
throw this slant
Mhm.
route. And just a nice job, team defense. And is this the quarter structure you talk about as well, where you've got your safeties here,
Yeah.
about 10 and 12 off,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. I
four
mean, that's
across?
what it looks like. Yeah.
Yep. Awesome. All right. I think that's the one thing with this Eagles defense. They're playing really good team defense. Greg, somebody asked me, the Eagles are in a radio interview. The Eagles are the number one defense. Does it feel like that to you? And I said, well, normally you associate that with like there's a 15 sack guy, or they're getting two turnovers a game, and it doesn't feel
Or
like that
teams
with the
that
Eagles.
blitz a
But
lot where you see special plays,
Right.
right.
and the Eagles are not like that. They're just playing. Well, that's how we started this conversation. I talked about all the details and the nuances of playing defense.
Hmm.
That's what they're doing really well.
Right. Right. All right. One more play. You talked about this Reed Blankenship interception as an example of A, Reed doing well, and B, the defense in general doing its job. So why don't you set up what you saw here
Yeah,
on
this
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 interception?
this is a great, in many ways, tutorial of quarters coverage, and it's not too difficult to understand, particularly since we have the picture. If you just go a little further, Jeff, go a
Sure.
little further. We want to go before the snap, but go a little further. So let's let the motion happen. So stop it right about here.
Hmm.
All right. So this is a perfect structure for quarters, okay? Where are the two safeties? They're about 12 to 13 yards from the off the ball. Look at the two corners. They're about 5, 6 yards off the ball. This is a quarter structure, okay? Now, the one of the key things in quarters, and it's a big belief of Vic Fangio and everybody who comes from the Fangio school, is you want your underneath zone defenders to reroute number two, meaning the receiver who's second from the outside. So that's Noah Brown here. So look where Cooper DeJean is. Cooper DeJean is in position to reroute two. Okay.
Hmm.
That's critical. That, in many ways, is the reason this play happened, because this is going to be what we call a flood concept. It's going to be a vertical route, a flat route, and Noah Brown's going to run the intermediate route to the outside, the intermediate outcut. Okay?
Hmm.
Now, if he's able to get a free release to run his intermediate outcut, a free access and run straight, then he's going to get outside of Blankenship. And the best Blankenship would probably do is knock the ball down at best or tackle him after he catches it. Okay? But start to run it if you don't mind, Jeff.
Hmm.
Look at what Cooper DeJean does. He forces him to release inside.
Hmm.
Okay? So now
Leverages him. Yep.
what that means is Blankenship can stay outside of him.
Hmm.
Okay? And the other thing about quarters is their belief that corners, stay right here.
Hmm.
Corners always run with number one. So on the backside, Slay is going to run with, I think that's Zacchaeus. He's going to
Hmm.
run with him. So that means Gardner Johnson is going to have eyes inside, and you can see that. So that means Blankenship does not have to worry at all if Noah Brown were to cross the formation and run an over route or a crosser, because Gardner Johnson's going to pick him up. So
Hmm.
all he's concerned about is if Noah Brown comes to him, then he's responsible for him. But because of what Cooper DeJean did, Blankenship can stay outside of Brown. And if you run it, you'll see exactly how that produces the interception. Because now Brown wants to get back outside because he's
Hmm.
the intermediate outcut in this flood concept.
Yep.
But Blankenship is outside of him.
And he puts him in the right position to jump at him.
Mm.
Right. So that's the detail. So Cooper DeJean, you know, that nuance of rerouting number two was
Hmm.
probably the most critical part of this play.
Adam and I were talking in the post-game show about the Eagles last year having a real issue, not only with communication, but their leverages and how they were funneling one player to another in their match carry and deliver principles and other principles like this. And this is sort of perfection, as you
It's
mentioned, Greg.
perfection.
I mean,
Perfection.
there were a couple of plays I noticed where it's not about lockdown coverage. It's just about the zones were not there. The lanes weren't there for Daniels to make the throw he wanted to make.
Right.
So
When
the
you
only thing
call
he could have done
flood,
is really dump this off to the running back here at the
I was
30.
thinking that. Yeah,
Yeah.
when
that's
you
about
call
it.
flood,
There's
you're
your
hoping
hot.
to throw the intermediate outcut. That's what you're hoping to get on flood, to throw the intermediate outcut.
Right.
Because you
And
know the corner is going to run vertically with number one.
right.
That's going to happen.
Adam, as you mentioned, this is a good example of the patience that everybody says you have to play with when you face a Fangio defense. Sometimes taking that little out here, and I don't think this was third down. I think it was the first play. It was after the
It was the first
Barkley.
play when
Yeah.
the game was it 1910?
Yes, because Barkley had just rushed for the
Yeah, yeah,
touchdown.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, this is the play where maybe you just, hey, I'm just gonna live with taking this, 5 yard route there to my running back and call it a day. But that was good. I'm glad that I had cut that and you talked about that because that was a really big play in the game
And it's
as the Eagles
details.
went.
It's all details.
Yeah, all in the details, as you say. All right, let's flip this out, Greg, and talk about the Eagles' offense now. Not a huge day offensively, only 221 passing yards for Jalen Hurts and his receivers. AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, not a really breakout game. What did you see in general from the tape offensively about the team?
I didn't think it was a great offensive performance in this particular game. They couldn't get the run game going, and they're really a run-based team. They're not a passing team, a strict passing team. So, I thought that when the run game is sort of sporadic, it wasn't terrible, but it just, it wasn't great. I think their offense at times can stall. And um, so that's kind of what I thought happened in the game. And then obviously you got to the fourth quarter, you know, in many ways, I thought that Gainwell kind of jump started the offense.
He did.
But
Yeah.
yeah, but also the Barkley 43-yard reception on 3rd and 6. I thought that was a big play. They're really good in no huddle. That's been something we've talked about. That stands out in every game. When they go no huddle, they seem to really produce positive plays because they probably get the defense in some kind of default situation where they know what the defense is going to look like.
Hmm.
So, but overall, I thought that it was kind of an up and down offensive performance.
Greg, the Washington played a little bit of big nickel. Did that have any impact on the Eagles' offense? You thought at all?
No, they play big nickel every week. The Eagles
Yeah.
were prepared. That wasn't a big factor
Yeah.
because don't forget it's Dan Quinn. Think
Right.
about what
Yeah.
he did in Dallas. He played
Did in
big
Dallas? Yeah, that's
time.
right. That's right.
J. Ron Kerr. So
Gotcha.
coaches coach against coaches. They knew that they were going to get a ton of big nickel. That was
Gotcha.
not a surprise.
Okay.
That does enable them, I guess, against the Eagles' run defense. At least have Chin, who's a pretty good box type safety, right, to be in there because it looked like Washington was playing a lot of guys in their front
Yeah.
seven close to the line of scrimmage. Because for the most part, they did a pretty good job against the Eagles' run game until Barkley actually until Gainwell, as you said, started off and then Barkley finished it. What about the Eagles' run game, Greg? As far as designs, did they do things differently as far as trapping or offensive line movement that you thought was a benefit to them?
Well, I thought because their run game was not probably as efficient and consistent as they wanted, when they got to early in the fourth quarter, and it was Gainwell who was in the game at the time, not Barkley. We saw them run a tackle trap, and we saw them run a wham trap on the very next play, and it was both no huddle. I'm not going to sit here and say it's the first time they ran those plays all year because I can't remember every single run play. But I don't think either one, guys, unless you can remember, Geoff or Adam, I don't think those have been foundation runs for them this season. So, like I
Right.
said, I'm not going to sit here and say, wow, I've never seen it. But I don't think either one of those runs have been foundation runs.
No, in fact, I know we've talked about every once in a while, maybe 2 or 3 times a year, when we're doing tape review, we're like, hey, I haven't seen, there's Jordan Mailata trapping up or the right
Right,
tackle, Lane Johnson. And you're right, they're mostly kind of inside zone, some duo, some wide zone a little
right.
bit or stretch. So yeah, that I don't want to say it's basic, but I did notice in watching, I'm like, wow, they're doing more athletic movement up front in the second half, especially. And
And I think you do that when you feel like your run game is not exactly what you want it to be, because that was early in the fourth quarter. And
right.
in some ways, that seemed to get their offense kickstarted a little bit.
On Greg's point, Geoff,
Hmm.
Barkley had a majority of his yards in the second half. He only had 56 in the first half. When I say only 56, he had 90 in the second
Hmm.
half, and that's
Well, he
when they
had the
really got
39
rolling.
yard and the 23-yard touchdown. Yeah.
Yeah, they got rolling late. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. So you mentioned no huddle and using Kenneth Gainwell to get things started in the offensive line, Greg. So this was the first of the three straight
So this
runs that
this
we
was the
saw.
tackle trap.
Tackle trap. So describe tackle trap for people who are watching at home.
So what a trap is you're going to let. So I think the trapper here was Johnson on this play.
Yep.
So
Right tackle.
right, the right tackle Johnson. So what you do, and you do this normally against four-man D line penetrating type fronts, where you know that the D tackles are going to work upfield. Okay, so you want to exploit their strength basically. So
Hmm.
what you'll do is here it's going to be the one technique or the two eye, whoever that is. I think it's Johnny Newton.
I think you're right.
So what you're going to see is they're essentially, my guess is that Dickerson probably took one step to his right just for so Newton couldn't fly upfield. And
Hmm.
then what happens is, but after he does that, they kind of let him go.
Hmm.
And then the trap comes from Johnson, who sort of, if you want to call it a pull, it's called a trap. But he
Hmm.
pulls and he blocks Newton. So now, because of that, Dickerson can then work right up to the second level
Right.
and you get second level blocks. And yeah, well, go ahead, let's run it and you'll
Yeah, we'll
see.
show it here right there. So right
Yeah,
there is
so
where you
so
see
so
Dickerson
Dickerson
engage.
initially engages Newton, so Newton can't just fly,
Right.
and then he's going to angle block the D end so you can get the left tackle and the center working right up to the second level. They don't
Hmm.
have any first level blocks.
Right.
And you can see Johnson though pulling and he nails Newton and
Hmm.
boom, Gainwell goes right in behind him. And because look, Dickerson can go right up to the second level
Yep.
and so can the center, and you get this.
Yep.
Beautiful.
Yep. In fact, I think Dickerson blocks down on the D end, and that's Myalata that's jumped
That's
out.
my lot, right? Because
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's
Dickerson
okay,
blocked.
but it's the same
Yeah,
concept. You just
yeah.
have Dickerson blocking down on Myalata's guy, and
But you get
Myalata goes
angle
up.
blocks, which are easier blocks. You get
Right.
angle blocks.
Right. And look at that. I mean, I like Kenny Gainwell. He
He
gets,
fit it
you could say he
well.
gets skinny through the hole, but he
Yep,
doesn't
he
get
fit it.
touched for the
Yeah.
first 10 yards of that.
No.
Yep. Yep.
And then, as you mentioned, Greg, right here, now almost getting into the third level is Jurgens, who's just
Yeah.
out ahead of there doing that.
And
That's
by the
Jason.
way, that's what Jurgens' game is. Jurgens is not a powerful, hand-to-hand combat guy. You
Mhm.
want him on the move.
Right. And just to give people a clearer picture from
So
the
here's a
front
really
end.
good picture of it.
Yeah. So right away, you see Mailata jump into the second level. You see Jurgens do it. There's Lane Johnson coming across, trapping, as you said, and getting
Yeah,
his
that's a
block
trap
on
block.
Newton. Yeah. Really well executed.
And the very next play was they added the wham element to it. And if you have it, Jeff, I think you do, right?
Oh, you know me, Greg. You just
Yeah.
know me like a book right there. Because this is no huddle. So I wanted to show everybody
Yeah,
this
they
is
went
not
no
the
Yeah.
line of
huddle.
scrimmage.
They've worked this pretty well, the no huddle.
Yes,
This
they
is
have.
how
Now
they
in
do it.
this one, Greg, it's going to be a wham and
This
a
is wham trap. So they're
wham
going to
trap.
have Becton, the right guard. He'll be
Mhm.
the trap blocker, and Goddard will be the wham blocker. Okay.
Right.
So,
So,
so uh, Goddard's going to wham block one D tackle. That's called a wham block.
mhm.
Becton, you see him, he goes and traps across the formation. And then look, you get the same thing. You get Myalata and Jurgens clean up to the next level.
Yep. Right
So
here and right here.
you get great first level angle blocks, and you
Mhm.
get two offensive linemen clean up to the second level. And
Yep.
boom, here you go.
It's funny if this is Saquon, you wonder if this is a touchdown. Not
I
that
was thinking the same thing. Because Gainwell, hey, look, he's had a nice season, and by the way, he had a good training camp. He's just
And by the
not
way,
explosive.
this worked this week. They may not run it this week. Don't forget the Rams, if they're going to be in base, it depends what
Uh-huh.
the Eagles put on the field. But
Sure.
the
Five-man
Rams
front.
play with a five-man front, and you
Right.
usually don't see traps against five-man fronts. You
Hmm.
usually don't. I'm not saying it's never, but you normally don't.
Right. You see how the
Yeah.
safety here goes low on Canewell to tackle, and this is where Saquon probably does some kind of acrobatic leap and backwards hurdle, and then
Is that
stays
where
on
he
his feet.
pirouettes and jumps through?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So from this angle, we'll see it again. To your point with Goddard, and there's Becton going
Yeah.
across the line. Nice block, and then Goddard. Who's 94? Is that Payne?
It's beautiful.
Yeah, just it's just
Mhm.
enough in there. That's a pretty good effort from Goddard on a guy who weighs 300 pounds right there. So
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't have to pancake him. He just has
no.
to make sure he doesn't get
And
shoved
Mailata
back.
got a hand on 54.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Good.
And then
really good
this one
stuff.
was just inside zone. This is the third one in a row, no huddle again. I think it's just basic inside.
This one's inside zone. Yeah.
Yep. And look at that great block though by Lane on 94. I mean, he's
Man.
ripping off of him.
Yep.
I mean, Gainwell does not get touched for the first
Yeah.
5-6 yards of this route, and that's
The yards
that's-
before
that's offensive
contact.
line. Yeah,
The yards before contact numbers for Gainwell in this game must have been massive.
I'm sure, and he only had a few carries, so
I know.
the average was pretty high on that.
I mean,
Nice
that gain,
job.
that was either 6 or 7 yards there. That's still a really good gain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is John D. Filippo says 5 yards or more is an explosive play.
Yeah.
And there's
They call it-
Becton coming off of his guy to make sure he gets the safety coming up the middle, or linebacker Luvu coming up the middle. Nice job.
Good.
Yeah, that was good offensive line work right there.
Yeah, so
Alex-
that really
Alex-
stood out to me when I saw those plays. I was like, wow, I can't recall seeing, that, and they were really effective.
Ram in the trap. Nice.
There you go. Every once in a while, it doesn't have to be Saquon saving the day. It could be Kenny Gainwell who gets in there and
Kenny Gainwell's
gets
a
a
really
nice
nice number 2 back.
right.
Really
He is.
nice number 2 back.
And we know the coaches love him, Adam. I mean, they rave about him in all the press conferences and talk about his work ethic.
I'll tell you what, and we've seen this now at tight end when Goddard's out with, Stoll, unfortunately, is gone, but how they've sort of used Calcaterra and Stoll. If Saquon couldn't play, or he's, hopefully for the Sixers, the Eagles, that they have like they don't have to play week 17 with the last game, and we get to see Shipley and Gainwell carry the ball.
Yeah.
Shipley's more explosive, and Gainwell's more downhill and decisive. That's a pretty good combo if they had to do it.
Yep, absolutely. All right, good stuff. Let's just finish it off with this. What are your give me a little look ahead outlook on the Rams, what they do, and where the biggest tests are for the Eagles.
Well, when you play the Rams, very quick Cliff Notes points. The Rams are motion as much as any team in the league. They used what we call reduced or cut splits as much as any team in the league with their receivers close to the formation. Now, if you're going to play in a quarter structure, which the Eagles will, you don't have to deal with all the motions because you're in a balanced defensive secondary look. So you don't have to start adjusting to every move. So I imagine you'll see a ton of that quarter structure. Defensively, they've got, and again, they're young, so you never know. It's a week-to-week thing. 2 things stand out when I watch the Rams on defense. Number one, their defensive pass rush front is going to be great because they've got a second-year player in Kobe Turner, a rookie in Braden Fisk, a second-year player in Byron Young, and a first-year player in Jared Verse. That's their pass rush front, and those guys are going to be great, okay? The other thing they've started doing over the last month, and it's really helped their defense, they play a ton of dime, and they play Jalen McCullough, who's a safety, essentially as kind of a safety linebacker, and they've done that over the last month, where they've probably played 25% dime, give or take, over the last month. So those 2 things really stand out on defense.
How about that?
All right, should be a good game. Rams, Eagles, prime time.
And
They've been playing each other a lot lately.
the one thing where the Eagles could have an advantage, and it has to be an advantage in this game, is their D-line versus Rams O-line. Because if Stafford's comfortable, there's still, I mean, if you're just talking about pure throwing the football when you're comfortable, there's still no one like Stafford.
Absolutely. All right. You know what we're going to do next week? We're going to break down that game next week when we're back here on the show. That's going to do it for this episode. For Greg Cosell and Adam Caplan, I'm Geoff Mosher. Thanks for watching Inside the Tape with Greg Cosell on Inside the Birds.